Everybody loves a clown. Painted face and bright red nose, the button eyes black as crows, the floppy shoes and silly hat, the bloody axe and baseball bat. You'll laugh, you'll chuckle, you'll even grin. That is until the nightmares creep in. Is he in the closet or under the bed? It doesn't matter. You'll soon be dead.
Hello everyone, Fine Minute here. Hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. It's been a while. Almost like I want to say 2 months since my last upload. Yeah, sorry for the lack of content. I've just been so busy lately with, like haunt season and of course like bleeding into like holiday season. There's just a lot of stuff going on in my life right now. But now I'm back. And of course, I had to keep that tradition of making an annual video based on my thoughts on Halloween Horror Nights. Now, as of this recording, it has been a month since Halloween Horror Nights 2025 has concluded, and before I cry and hibernate until 2026, I figured I'd give my thoughts on like what I thought about all the attractions, including the houses, scare zones, Tram, you name it. Now, 2025 already sounded like a stacked year. Not only do we get two of the biggest like horror franchises right now in the event, in Five Nights at Freddy's and Terrifier, but we also got like a lot of cool like outside the box stuff like Fallout and Horrors of the Wyatt Six. Some of the stuff that we got exclusively in Hollywood is a little disappointing because it was just mostly stuff that we've seen before in Hollywood. But I mean, like it is like some of the fan favorites, so I guess like we couldn't complain too much. I generally think that on paper this lineup sounds like the best since 2019, mostly because it has like a little bit of everything for everyone. But how was the execution? Did like all the attractions live up to the hype? Were they as good as they were promising? Well, that's what we're here to talk about. Little disclaimer before I begin the review, I actually worked this event this year as a scare actor, and because of that, I didn't get a chance to go through all of the houses like as much times as I would like to like form like a legit opinion, because I always try to go like as many times as possible to the houses, but this year I wasn't really able to, mostly because like I was working it, and also there was this whole thing like midway through the season they made like a new policy that like, oh, if you're in a certain venue then like you can't do any of the other houses during your break, which we had no issue with. I remember we used to do that a lot, like from the years past. But like I guess this year, like something happened, and we couldn't do that anymore, which is kind of disappointing. But I think I'm safe to say that like I've done every house like enough times to like form like a legit like opinion, like a concrete opinion. But anyways, I'm gonna stop yapping and just gonna get straight to the review. I'm gonna be talking about the houses from worst to best. Then I'm gonna talk about the scare zones and the terror tram, and then near the end of the video, I'm just gonna talk about any other like final miscellaneous thoughts I have like regarding the event, that isn't scare zones or houses and stuff. So, without further ado, let's get right into it.
Five Nights at Freddy's. That's where I wanna be. Five Nights at Freddy's.
Kicking this ranking off is my number 8, my least favorite house of the year, and unfortunately, it's gonna be Poltergeist. Now, if you're new to my channel, I actually do not care at all for repeating mazes, especially those that don't have a singular thing changed about them. Biggest example? Killer Clowns from Outer Space. First time it came to HHN, it instantly became one of my all-time favorite mazes, but when they brought it back a couple years later, it was the exact same thing. All the set pieces were recycled, all the scares were in the same spots, everything just became so predictable and boring. And that was the exact case with Poltergeist. I really enjoyed the first version, although it did have some flaws. I was hoping John Murdy and his crew would maybe fix some of those flaws this time around, but they didn't really do that. All they did was add one scare actor in the kitchen scene. The layout was the exact same. They even brought back all the black walls, as you can see in this footage where you could barely see anything. It truly felt like they just threw in a house that wouldn't be too expensive to make again in the lineup, so they could like cut corners and save a little bit more money for all those FNAF animatronics. So because they didn't update it, it showed its age and paled in comparison with most of the other houses. I don't know a single person that actually enjoyed this house, except for maybe those who haven't experienced it back in 2018. So yeah, Poltergeist is the last place for me because it was one of the most egregious examples of being a direct repeat that was somehow nowhere near as magical as the first version. Now my number 7 might be a bit of a controversial placement since I know a lot of you guys really enjoyed this one this year, but for me it's gonna be Scarecrow, music by Slash. This one more or less has the same issues as Poltergeist, a returning maze with little to no changes that's only here to fill up a slot in the house lineup. Slash's music was heavily advertised here. Now, I liked all of the music he's made for the Universal Monsters mazes, but I can't defend him this time. Outside of the song playing at the facade, which I can't lie, made me bob my head every now and then, it was just one melody playing throughout the entire house. Not only was the actual melody not that exciting or notable, but it felt so out of place with Scarecrow in this like 1920s, like 1930s Dust Bowl aesthetic. The electric guitar solos would have been justified if the environments and characters were updated to look a bit more edgy or modern, but again, it's the exact same thing as 2022's maze. So yeah, I thought Scarecrow, music by Slash, was just a waste of the T-pad space. The only reason why I'm putting it above Poltergeist is because the scare actors here are just as awesome as they were 3 years ago. The scares still hit hard, even if I knew what scares were coming. So quick little shout out to the Scarecrow cast, you guys were always awesome. Now we're moving on to the more exciting stuff. My number 6, while well made and enjoyable, was kind of a letdown, not gonna lie, and that house is Fallout. I remember doing this house for the first time during our first dress rehearsals and was so underwhelmed by it. Now the sets are really impressive, a lot of them are really big and really detailed. However, I think because the sets were so big, they took up so much space to the point where they only had a little bit of scenes. Yeah, the short duration of this house was definitely my biggest issue with it. Another issue I had were the scares not really hitting that hard. I guess that's to be expected since Fallout isn't really a horror series. I also don't like how the scenes are just presented to the guests out of context. I was kind of hoping the house would visually tell a version of the story of the show, but I think it just mostly confused those who haven't seen the show. Also, some of the scenes recreated were just so random, like the desert scene with the cheap wallpaper, and also the bear scene. The bear itself was really cool and impressive on a technical level, but this is the only time we see Maximus, and he's not even the one inside the T-60 armor. And Snip Snip, the robot, wasn't an actual robot, he was just a projection. Yeah, there were just so many little things here and there that just kind of disappointed me. During the first week or two of the event, the whole house just felt a little incomplete. Well, maybe it kind of was. Outside of adding an actual final scare, instead of just like an awkward final scene that's just promoting the second season, I noticed they added a couple more props here and there, so it did get better for me as the event went on. While Fallout overall had a few shortcomings, I thought it was still pretty decent. Now my number 5 is definitely going to be a controversial placement since I know a lot of you guys really love this house, but it's gonna be Monstros 3, The Ghosts of Latin America. Now I know, but just let me explain. I remember a lot of fans not really giving this one a ton of attention when it got announced, despite the previous 2 versions being incredibly well made. And surprise surprise, it was another successful haunt. This, along with my number 4, ended up being the dark horses of this year's event. The creative team always goes all out with the horror and the mayhem in this universe. The look of the ghosts are actually so scary looking, the masks are very detailed. I think overall this is probably the scariest house of the year. They hit really hard and the characters get really close to you as well. I also really like the ending. Muerte blows out his lantern and it's pure darkness throughout the rest of the house while you're stuck with these creatures. I think that's definitely one of the best uses of the infamous black walls. Now, I do have one major issue with Monstros 3, and it's honestly the only reason why it's not on my top 3. And that issue I have involves this lady right here. I was worried they would just reuse set pieces from the La Llorona maze from a couple years back, and my worry was realized. There is one cool scene with an abuelita telling her grandchildren about La Llorona, and then La Llorona herself banging on the window eyeing those children. That was cool, but everything else was the same old stuff. Dead kids floating in the river, kids getting eaten alive by La Llorona, and then a giant monster comes out to attack us. I guess as the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but I am a little disappointed that most of the attention was given to a character that we've already seen rather than the two brand new ones. But other than that, Monstros 3 was yet another solid addition to this Latin American universe and a solid final installment of the Muerte trilogy. My number 4 is going to be WWE Presents The Horrors of the Wyatt Six. Now, I didn't know a single thing about the Wyatt Six or WWE in general, so I had no idea what to expect. And again, this ended up being a dark horse of the event because of how good it was. It was just so good, man. First of all, the characters seem really cool, and because each of them have like a different aesthetic, it lended to all the rooms in the house having a lot of variety. And also, for a guy who doesn't know much about modern wrestling, John Murray sure did manage to pack a lot of Easter eggs for the fans. The pacing and the energy here was just so good. There was never a dull moment or even a moment to breathe. But I think the main highlight for me was the scares. They hit pretty hard, and some of them were actually pretty creative, and unlike anything else I've seen in Horror Nights, the actors were just clearly having a fun time with their roles. In fact, I also just want to give like another quick shout out this time to the Wyatt Six cast. It probably was not an easy task to not only be hella aggressive to guests, but also honor Bray Wyatt's legacy. So major shout out to you guys, y'all killed it every time I was there. I also want to call out all the horror fans that didn't give this house a chance. It always had like the lowest wait times every night. Y'all were sleeping on a banger house, and shame on you. No, but for real, I'm being over dramatic, but yeah, Wyatt Six was just an absolute blast. Alright, now we're at the top 3. My number 3 is actually the highest rated maze of HHN 2025, and that is Terrifier.
Gore is interesting. I just love seeing how bodies react to certain events and things. I might be a little insane, sorry.
Now, ever since the second movie came out, I've always wanted to see this franchise at HHN. Not because I'm like this big super fan, but because I always thought the movies had so much potential for a fun and intense haunted house. So is that what we got this year? In my honest opinion, yes. If I were to rank these houses based purely on the fun factor, this would probably be number 1. I like the approach they took with this maze. Having the funhouse from part 2 be the foundation of how all the iconic scenes are connected together was a great idea. I also liked how Terrifier had a good mix of like creative original scenes and scenes from the movies. All the actors who played Art were clearly having a lot of fun every time I walked through, which made for some of the most interactive moments I've had with scare actors. I know a lot of people didn't like the fact that Art wore masks in the maze instead of like makeup like the ones that walk around the park, and I would understand that complaint if the masks looked cheap. And to me, I thought they looked fine. Nowhere near the level of say like Ash vs Evil Dead. Dude, those Bruce Campbell masks were oof, they were bad. When this was first announced, I was worried they would tone down the gore or just straight up not feature the scenes that made Terrifier famous, and I am so glad that wasn't the case. I find it hilarious that a theme park attraction where kids can go to featured the scene where the girl gets cut in half. Yeah, I do wish they included a bit more kills from the movies though, more specifically ones from part 3. The original scenes from the creative team were pretty cool. I love how the maze just basically breaks the fourth wall and gives us a scene where Art pretends to be a maze host, and then we see an Art scare actor get killed by the real Art. You could just tell John Murray had so much fun writing the treatment for this house. One thing I will complain about though is that this scene is the only scene where the victim is played by a performer. All the other kills were recreated using static dummies. It would have been so disturbing to see real life actors reaching out to us for help, especially the girl who gets salt and bleach on her torn flesh. We also see the little pale girl in the house, only once. And again, she was just a puppet. I do like the incorporation of Art with a Tommy gun, because it's not a Terrifier project without Art pulling out the 9. But again, it would have been cooler if he was an actor, not a statue. But I guess Universal doesn't want to deal with any like controversies or complaints with firearms being pointed at guests. And going back to the kills, the whole maze consisted of a lot of them, but not a whole lot of actual scares. I do wish they incorporated like some trigger scares, as opposed to just having like Art show off his Carnival of Carnage. But other than that, Terrifier was tons of fun, and I loved how weird and wacky it got at times. Definitely deserving of highest rated of the year. My number 2, my second favorite of the year, might be another controversial placement, and it's going to be...
Thank you, Chica from Five Nights at Freddy's.
Now, I've noticed a lot of Horror Nights fans have FNAF at the lower end of their rankings, and I do kind of understand why. It's not the scariest house of the year, and some people believe that FNAF is just simply too childish to be taken seriously, especially for a haunted attraction. But when I look at the houses, I don't let just the scares dictate my enjoyment of certain houses. I also pay attention to the set design, the special effects, the immersion, the sound design, and many other little factors. And the puppetry and overall artistry alone that was displayed here just can't make me put it lower on my ranking. I just can't. But let me get into more detail about why this is my second favorite of 2025. First of all, the facade was really cool. Definitely one of the best ones they made here in Hollywood. It was a great first impression for fans of both Horror Nights and FNAF. Personally, I believe this was not as unscary as a lot of you guys made it out to be. I think the ghost children made for some sneaky scares in places you wouldn't have expected. The sets were recreated in live action very well, especially the security room, which I imagine must have been so satisfying to finally see in real life for a lot of fans. And of course, I had to talk about the animatronics. I believe there's only one actual animatronic, and the rest of the mascots are puppets. First of all, I gotta address the elephant in the room. Yes, it is very disappointing that only Freddy is up on the main stage, as opposed to Orlando, who had all three. I know John Murdy explained that Hollywood's event is apparently a lot more expensive to put together than Orlando, and you could argue whether or not that excuse is valid or complete BS, but that's a discussion for another time. Anyway, the actual animatronic is cool looking, and very accurate to the movie and the game. I'm also really impressed with how they were able to bring the puppets to life. They move very well. Ones that really stuck with me were the full body versions of Freddy and Springtrap, and it really just reaffirmed my statement about how far along the technology and special effects for HHN have evolved over the years. Really awesome stuff. Houses like FNAF really remind me why I fell in love with Horror Nights in the first place. What other haunt can bring to life some of the general public's favorite horror characters and environments this well? I'm glad fans of this franchise finally got to see this in person and that it didn't disappoint. We finally reached my number one, my favorite maze of HHN 2025, and that house is...
Kelly, I got us! Just let me know about
Jason Universe. For some added context, Jason Voorhees is one of my personal favorite horror movie characters, and when they first announced the Jason Universe brand, I had mixed emotions. How will the character be utilized now? Are they allowed to reference the past films? Will they be making new movies in the future? Or will he be just this mascot for like a new line of Funko Pops or Spirit Halloween merch and such? In my anticipation video, I mentioned that the best thing that HHN House can do is make me excited for the future of Jason, and in my opinion, they did exactly that. I fairly enjoyed it the first time I experienced it, but it wasn't until I experienced it a couple more times and saw other fans talking about their experience made me realize how nostalgic this maze was. The reason why Jason Universe stuck with me so much and why it ended up being my favorite house of the year was because it reminded me of the glory days of HHM, back when the Titans of Terror reigned supreme. We're so used to seeing Michael Myers and Leatherface, but it's been 8 years since we last saw Jason, and 15 years since he had his own standalone maze. Some houses this year focused on pleasing fans like FNAF and Terrifier, and others focused a lot on scaring the hell out of people like Monstros and Scarecrow. I feel like Jason had a good balance of both of those aspects. It had a little bit of everything. It had a cool, interesting concept and story, good scares, awesome kills, cool visuals, and fan service. In Terrifier, I was hoping for actual scares in the kill scenes, but that's what I got here in Jason. They managed to show off a gnarly kill while also having it be an actual jump scare. But honestly, the biggest compliment I could give this house is that it finally sold me on Jason Universe as a whole. They said they're working on a new movie and a new game, and if they're anything like the Horror Nights house, then I think Jason is in good hands. The only complaint I have here is that there were times where I either missed a lot of the scares, or there would be like a big conga line in the middle of the maze. Yeah, just a few awkward walkthroughs, but even then, that's not the maze's fault. So yeah, this just goes to show how awesome this house was. So awesome that it became my favorite house of 2025.
O cholera, czy to Freddy Fazbear?
Now, let's talk about what might be the biggest surprise for me in 2025, and that's the Terror Tram. It was once again Blumhouse themed, and because of that, I was not at all excited for it. I really didn't enjoy the Tram from last year because they just kind of threw in some Blumhouse characters in the Universal backlot and then called it a day. But this year, they actually took the time to put in real effort. In last year's review video, I mentioned that there was a lack of setup in the little pre-show that they played before we get off the tram. It was just like a collection of like, oh, best of Blumhouse. And I mentioned something along the lines of like, oh, like, what if Megan hijacked the tram and she kicked us out to like meet some of her friends and, in other Blumhouse movies? And wouldn't you know it, they more or less kind of did exactly that this time around. The selection of films they decided to represent are once again stuff we've already seen before in Horror Nights. But what's interesting about this year's Tram was that there were sections that kind of felt like outdoor mini mazes, and that made for some cool jump scares. I also did prefer seeing characters from Insidious and Exorcist Believer over people from Happy Death Day and Freaky. Overall, it just felt like there was a lot more going on this time around. As far as negatives go, I don't like how the purge continues to still be a thing at HHN. And by the way, I didn't watch Dangerous Waters this year. Once again, Juber's claim is only reserved for VIP, which I absolutely dislike, and I really hope Universal considers making that area accessible for all guests again. It'd be a real bummer if every year they take away less and less, while they raise prices more and more. But that's a discussion for another video. Anyway, Terry Tram once again was more or less the same thing as previous years, but there was a lot about it this time around that make me like it a bit more. Now let's talk about the scare zones of 2025. If you guys watched some of my other videos, you probably know that I'm not a big fan of HHN Hollywood's scare zones. When I first started going, they were really cool, but as of recently, they don't really put that much effort into the decor of the zones. They'll usually have like one or two props or like dioramas of spooky statues, blast some dubstep music, and then call it a day. I had a little bit of hope because the themes of this year's zones sounded really promising, and lo and behold, for the first time in a while, I genuinely enjoyed the zones this year. At this point, I've already come to terms with the fact that because the park and the layout is always changing, then the street experiences can only offer so much. So taking that into consideration, I was just looking forward to seeing all the scare actors do their thing. And I was pleasantly surprised that they actually took the time to put in like real effort, outside of the scare actors like doing their thing, which is always awesome. For example, the Chainsaw Clowns and the Carnival of Carnage, while once again having like one or two props, which included Clownzilla's head, shout out to Killer Clowns, had a little bit of lore going on with all the different clowns. They all had their own names and their own unique personality traits, and also the colorful clowns who made silly noises being intimidated by the silent but deadly black and white clown was a really cute idea. More on art a little bit later, but Murder Crows, that one's always cute and fun. The Stilt Walkers are always awesome. But I think the real star of the show this year, when it came to scare zones, was hands down Noche de Brujas. The Front Street scare zone, they're always fun, but this year they really took it to a whole nother level. Not only were the characters really fun, and the little ceremonies that they would do every 45 minutes was awesome, but I genuinely have not seen like a street this themed or decked out in years. There were more than just skeletons and then one or two projections on boxes. When I was filming my last construction update and saw all the progress in Front Street, it really took me back in time to the first couple years that I've attended HHN. If they can keep this energy and effort for Front Street, or just all the scare zones in general, then I can see myself genuinely loving them again. Oh, and the Hellbullies, it was a cute little mini scare zone, although it did feel out of place with the Blumhouse theme. To close out my thoughts on the outdoor park interactions, I gotta talk about Art the Clown. This is probably one of the smartest decisions, both creatively and business-wise, that Universal has ever made. Art is the most popular he's ever been right now, and they really did strike while the iron's hot. Usually scare actors at HHN can't really improvise that much, especially if they're playing a licensed character, but Universal really saw the potential in Art in terms of how interactive he can be. Him walking around the park also adds to the fact that just because a guest can be as far away from his house as possible, that doesn't mean you won't escape him. And this is something that I've always wanted on Horror Nights for a while, which is less safe spaces. And it turned out the art interactions became a major success. It really generated a lot of hype for the general public, especially in social media, and gave them more of an incentive to visit Universal Studios, come check out Halloween Horror Nights to come face to face with Art the Clown. So yeah, I think all the street experiences were an overall hit this year, and I hope they continue to go in this direction for next year.
God damn, I got that in my system. In my system.
Before I wrap this review up, I want to talk about a couple more things. First of all, the H-Lot needs to go. I'm sorry, I tried to give this area a chance for a few years now, And after seeing how long the express line was for Terrifier for a lot of nights, I just think that like it just reaffirms my statement that like that space is just too small to house not one but two mazes, especially if they're going to keep planning on putting headliners there like Chucky or Insidious. I swear I'm not being biased when I say this, but the old Metro sets was just so much more convenient in terms of spreading crowds. 3 houses, 2 scare zones, food trucks, and the whole area still managed to be a vibe, whereas H-Lot feels kind of claustrophobic if crowds are like really bad. I seriously hope Universal reconsiders using that area again, so they don't have to worry too much about like, you know, different lines converging together and such. There is one big W I gotta give Universal though, and that's for their food offerings this year. I feel like they really took notes from FanFest earlier this year in terms of the actual food. Usually whenever, like in the past, like whenever there was like a special event including HHN, they'll have the same-ish stuff like the bacon cheeseburgers and the pulled pork sandwiches, and of course the infamous 22-inch hot dogs. But this year, they actually put an effort into not only the variety of the food items, but also the theming. I think my favorite item this year is hands down the iguana on a stick in the Fallout restaurant. It was basically like a beard-battered, cornflake dusted corn dog, and it was so good. Another highlight for me was the Art Sunflower Glasses cookie, which had like a lot of raspberry and lemon flavors. I know a lot of people were hyping up the pizza and cupcake for FNAF, but I thought the pizza was okay and the cupcake was kind of mid. It was about time Universal finally put the same amount of effort they put into making and theming the drinks into the food items as of recent. Also, I gotta briefly talk about the music in the escalators once again. John Murdy said he too hated the playlist they've been using for the past couple years and promised he'd ask if it could be changed. Did they change it? No, but then yes, but not really. It started off as generic hip hop, but then midway through the event they just played the Terrifier soundtrack and it stayed like that for the rest of the run. So I'm hoping Universal finally listened and the playlist will be different next year. I just need the heavy metal back. I'm not a fan of Ice Nine Kills, but if their song playing in the scare mode showed us anything, it's that the people crave hard rock and metal at this Halloween event. And finally, I want to mention that it was so nice to scare act again for this year. One of the main reasons why I didn't scare act the past couple years is because I loved the event way too much as a guest. But this lineup was so stacked, I felt like I just had to be a part of it. I'm so glad I got to play such awesome characters. I want to give some massive final shoutouts to everyone involved in the making of this event. The makeup artists, the costumes department, all the supervisors, the show quality team, the operations teams for the houses, all the lighting and audio people, and even the guests who showed up and supported all of us this year. This community plays a big role in why I love Halloween Horror Nights, or just horror in general, so much. And this year truly was special. Here's to another year of fun frights. And that's gonna be it for today's video. I think 2025 is the best year for Halloween Horror Nights since 2019. Yeah, it was that good. It's just that like so many exciting IPs were featured this year, and I think most of them were represented very well. Half of the houses were like some of the best that John Murdy and his team have ever designed. The scare zones and the other like scare actor interactions like are heading in a direction that I'm really liking. And overall, just like 2025 was just such an exciting year to be a horror fan. Like so much cool stuff. 2025 was definitely like one for the books. It is upsetting that haunt season is over, but the good news is speculation season is just around the corner. So if you want to see any speculation videos of mine regarding the 2026 event, go ahead and click the subscribe button. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. Also, let me know down in the comments like your thoughts regarding this year's Halloween Horror Nights. What was your favorite house? What was your least favorite house? What did you think of the Tram? What did you think of the food and like drinks they had? Any thoughts you have regarding the event, let me know down in the comments. If you stuck around to the very end of the video, thank you so much for watching. And until then, see you all in the fog.
There I am, Gary, there I am!
Okay, dude. How many times do I have to tell you? Don't freaking try to scare me when I'm on my break. Hey, you're not supposed to be...